Firstly, we want to look at a quick definition of what a ratio is. So a ratio really compares. So when we speak of a ratio, we're comparing two numbers, right? So we're looking at it as a comparison. So a ratio is actually comparing two numbers. So that's what we're looking at it as. Now, we're comparing two numbers. For example, we could be comparing any form of relationship that we want to put to it. We could say two bags. We could say two bags for 4 persons. So in that case, we are comparing the 2 with the 4, 2 bags for 4 persons and stuff like that. Now, basically, when we look at a ratio, we really want to compare ideas, all right, ideas. But before we go there, let's look on how we can really represent ratios. So there are 3 ways in which you would see ratios being represented. You will see it in a word form. So when the ratio is represented in a word form, you would see, for example, something written as 5 to 6. All right, so this is in the word form, 5 to 6. So you literally see 2 come in between, 5 to 6. So it is saying 5 things to 6 things, and that's an idea. We're comparing these ideas. Also, it can be written in a colon form. And then when we use in the colon form, we're referring to, like, this same thing could be written as 5 to 6 if we're looking at it like that. 5 to 6, or depending on what we're doing, it could be 4 to 3 or 4 to 2, depending on what we're doing. But the colon form, there is a colon between the 2 numbers, and it still means 2. All right, so 5 to 6, 5 to 6, 4 to 2. Another way in which we can represent ratios, and we're talking about representing, we could represent it in a fraction form. If we really debate this, then we could show the difference between a fraction and a ratio. But basically what we're saying, you can write this as 5 divided by 6, and all of them would mean the same thing. So we're saying that these are the forms that we could represent ratios in. Word form, we have 5 to 6. In colon form, using a colon between the 2 numbers that we're comparing, it's going to be 5 to 6. Or we could have a 4 to 2, or as many things as you'd want to write. And then in the form of a fraction, we have a 5 over the 6, or 5 divided by the 6, and it's representing, saying the same thing. We're comparing the 2 numbers. So basically, this is like the forms in which we could write them. Mainly when we're writing things in ratio, we try to make sure that we have them in the common unit. So when we're writing ratios, we want to write them in a common unit. So writing ratios, we must use a common unit. And when we have a common unit, that will give a deeper idea into what we're doing. For example, let us say we have say 20 cents, and somebody else has say $3. Now, in order to write this as a ratio, we cannot write 20 to 3. We can't write 20 to 3. We cannot write 20 to 3 because they are not in one unit. So when they're in the same unit, then we have that opportunity where we could write it like this. So what we have to do is to convert everything to a common unit first, and mainly we rather to write them in the smaller units. For example, we know that it takes 100 cents, which is equal to $1. All right, so we know that it's 100 cents that will give us $1, and there we could utilize that to help us to go ahead and to write that. So since it takes 1 cent, 100 cents to give us that dollar, we can now write the $3 as 300 cents. So in this case, we can now write everything as, rewrite this as 20 cents to 300 cents. And then, because they're in the same unit, we could now remove the unit and say 20 to 300. And then we could cancel down this if we want to its lowest term. So if you want to cancel down this some more, we could cancel these. And 2 to 30, you could cancel these as 1 to 15. So we are saying that we could cancel down. So this is the same thing as saying 1 to 15. All right. In other words, 1 cent to 15 cents. So if we were, for example, giving 2 different persons these amounts, we could say the ratio of that person to that person is going to be 1 to 15. We could speak like that because we're in common. We're using a common unit. Now let's look at another case where we need to use like a common unit. Let's check this out. Now let us say that we have say 2 grams, or let's say 3 grams, and then another, so A has 3 grams and B has let us say 2 kilograms. Now if I'm asked to write the ratio of A to B, then I cannot just go ahead and write 3 to 2. I can't. As you see, it would have been incorrect because 3 to 2 means that they're in the same unit. That's what the ratio refers to, same unit, and that's not the case. So we're going to have to convert and change everything to 1. So in this case, it is wise to change them to the smaller unit. It takes 1,000 grams to give us 1 kilogram, which means that we need to multiply this by 1,000. All right, so we'll end up having 2,000 grams. So now we're looking at 2,000 grams. This can now be written as 3 grams to 2,000 grams. That's in a worded form, but what if we want to write this using colon? It would have been 3 to 2,000. Then we could drop the units because guess what? We are now relating things with a common unit, so we don't have to even write the units. And if we wanted to write this in a fraction form, it would have been 3 over 2,000. So basically we're saying that we could write them in various forms. Basically, but when we have them in a common unit. All right? So having a common unit. Let us look on just another little aspect of ratio. What if in a class we realize that we saw ourselves with 5 boys and we saw say 7 girls, or let me use probably 9 girls, right? 5 boys, 9 girls. Now if we're asked to write the ratio, if we want to write the ratio, so the ratio of boys to girls, the ratio of boys to girls would equal to, boys would come first, it's going to be 5 to 9. Because if you notice, the ratio of boys to girls, second. So that's 5 to 9. All right? But what if the question says, write the ratio of girls to boys. Then the girls would have come first. So that is going to equal to 9 to 5. So we have to look at what comes first. Also, what if they want us to find the ratio of, say, boys to the total students, or the total number of students, right? All right, so I'm just saying, so write the ratio of boys to the total number of students, all right? Total number of students there. we're looking at, for the total number of students, you're looking at 14. All right? So we're talking about, this would have been 5 boys to 14. All right? So we could write it in that form, or 5 to 14. Sorry about that. So we're saying, when we're writing things in ratio form, depending on what we have, we could represent them like this. All right? All right, good. Now let's look at another thing. What if we want to look at when ratios are equal? For example, if let us say I'm representing my ratios as 1 to 4. When ratios are equal, then comes a word that we call proportional parts, or proportion. So if 1 to 4 is equal to 2 to 8, so we're now looking at this ratio is equal to that ratio. This ratio can be represented as 1/4, and it is the same thing as 2/8. So you could see that this ratio is this ratio. Why? Because if I want to cancel down this, then I'll end up with 1/4 equal 1/4. So 2/8 is the same thing as 1/4. This sort of idea is what we call proportion. So when we deal with proportion is when we have equal ratios. So proportion deals with ratios that are equal. Another thing that we could use for it is equivalent fractions. All right, so if we look at equivalent fractions, then we're actually dealing with proportions. All right, so let's look at some equivalent fractions very quickly. Let's say we look at 1/2, which is the same as, say, 2/4, which is the same thing as 3/6, which is the same thing as, probably I'll go 8 to 16. So what we're saying is all of these are equivalent fractions, because if I do cancel down each, I'll get a half. All right, so what we're saying is these, if I should represent these in a ratio form, for example, this one can be written as 1 to 2, this one can be written as 2 to 4, this one as 3 to 6, and this one as 8 to 16. Now we're seeing that each of these, the one at the front would be a half at the one at the back. The first one is a half of the one at the back, the half of one at the back, half of one at the back. This is a half of that. Then you will realize that there is what we call proportional. So these are all proportional ratios, because guess what? They are equivalent in terms of fraction. We're talking about what portion of it, a half of this, or 2 times that, 2 times that, 2 times that, and stuff like that. So that is how proportion comes in. So when we say ratio and proportion, we get proportion when we have equal ratios, equivalent ratios. All right, and remember, in a better term, they must be referring to the same ideas. But if there's no ideas being referred to here, these are all proportional parts. All right, thank you for watching.